Chapter 1. I didn't like it at all. It was all too damn easy. A small voice in my head was nagging away, telling me this was wrong. And my instincts rarely were. Like a wary animal, I could almost smell the scent of danger in the chill summer night air. Yet the large English suburban house and garden I was viewing through the small, image-intensifying night sight could not have appeared more tranquil. The optical device jacked up the ambient light to create a ghostly green and white image that was something akin to that of a strong full moon. All the house lights had been off since 11 o'clock, and that had been nearly an hour earlier. Mullah Reda Rashid was a man of habit. Every day for the past 5 that I've been watching him, the Imam had retired at that time to pray in his bedroom, one final act of worship before sleeping. Every morning he rose at 5. What looked like black tea was taken to him by one of the 2 young male theology students who shared the house with him. Then one of them would drive Mullah Reda to the nearby mosque, in time to take morning prayers at 6. Every night he would be driven home again at around 7:30, when he would eat the evening meal that had been prepared for him. After supper, the cleric would potter around in his extensive garden, lovingly pruning roses and watering the potted plants. As the light faded, he would return indoors and work on his laptop until bedtime. Very occasionally, he would watch a television soap or catch the news. That was the routine. There was nothing suspicious about it all. According to Lassiter, my liaison officer at MI5, the Imam was known as a soft-spoken, mild-mannered, kindly, moderate cleric with a generous sense of humour. It had even earned him the affectionate nickname of the Merry Mullah amongst some of his congregation. But then I'd known Joe Lassiter for a long time, long enough to realise that he liked to hold his cards close to his chest and could be very possessive of his little pile of secrets. So why, I asked him, were government funds being allocated to a trusted private investigator and former soldier like me to keep such a man under costly surveillance? Lassiter, who pulled one of those infuriating, enigmatic little smiles of his. "If Mullah Reda is such an innocent and peace-loving cleric," he replied, "we have to ask ourselves why he surrounds himself with high-security fencing and has CCTV cameras installed. And why have 2 Dobermans wandering around loose in the grounds of a grand house he can't possibly afford, given what we know about his financial circumstances?" That was all I got from Lassiter. Of course, there was more to it than that, but it was clear that I wasn't going to be told what. I was just a humble alongside-er, as we are known in the intelligence trade, usually former military or police officers with impeccable security credentials, who are hired as freelancers in low-priority cases to ease the security service's workload. And I knew that since the 9/11 disaster, when members of the Al-Qaeda terrorist network flew 2 hijacked airliners into the Twin Towers in New York, MI5's resources have been stretched to breaking point and beyond. Then, in July 2005, it all moved much closer to home with the deadly, coordinated London bombings. The trouble was there was no quick fix available. All the British intelligence agencies have been run down since the collapse of the Soviet Union and the uneasy but ongoing peace in Northern Ireland. Of course, they all knew about the threat from the Islamic fundamentalist movement, which came to be called Al-Qaeda by the Americans, but it hadn't been given quite the high priority it deserved. Then 9/11 changed all that, big time. But MI5 and the Secret Intelligence Service MI6, which operates overseas, were in a poor position to infiltrate the Arab and Asian communities at home and abroad to gain the vital information needed to protect British interests. In desperation, they tried to recruit staff from the ethnic minorities in the UK, but met with little success. Gradually, it became clear that many more young Muslims than had first been realized were being sucked into the terror networks in Britain. So the number of possible suspects needing investigation just grew and grew and grew. That, I guessed, was why Lassiter had given Mullerada to me to have a look at. I wasn't complaining. The money was good, and by God, didn't I need it just now. I repositioned myself in the tree, trying to get a little more comfortable. It was going to be a long and no doubt fruitless night. The tree, an oak, had probably been standing there for 300 years, long before the 1930s house had been built and the garden fenced it in. I'd had to do my squirrel act, using a lightweight ladder to reach the branches of an adjacent chestnut tree on the outside of the garden. After hauling the ladder up after me and securing it amongst the leaves, I'd crawled out onto a bough, then swung myself precariously across onto a branch of the oak where they crossed over each other. I hadn't done that sort of thing for years, even as a sniper in the Royal Marines, and there's no bloody way I'd have considered it had there been any other position that gave me both the view and cover I needed. Although I'd learned to cope with it in my military life, I didn't like heights, and at 43, I knew I was definitely too old for this sort of thing. It was a long way down, and the ground was bone hard. I'd just raised the night sight to my eye for a quick check on the darkened house when a movement on the lawn caught my attention. A shadow appeared to detach itself from one of the low evergreen shrubs and dart across the lawn and patio, past the closed French windows. It was so quick, I barely had time to realize that it wasn't a cat, but an urban fox. Even as that registered, dazzling light exploded in my eyes and head like the second coming. The sudden blaze from the thermally triggered security lights was literally blinding, as it was magnified through the night sight, seemingly burning into my retinas. I'm sure I gasped aloud as I dropped the device into my lap, trying to steady myself on the branch. Then the air was filled with the menacing yap of dogs. As the two huge Dobermans rounded the corner of the house, neck and neck, each in a frenzy to find the intruder before the other. One pulled up short, salivating in his anticipation of prey, foam streaking from its powerful jaws. It halted at the shrub from which the fox had emerged. The second dog slowed and turned, watching its kennel mate as the creature rapidly began to follow the scent trail across the lawn towards the patio. The two of them then vanished from my view. But then the barking began again. That was when the light came on in the living room, and the French doors were suddenly thrown open. Mullerada's two theology students emerged, looking decidedly anxious as they rapidly surveyed the floodlit garden. I was surprised they were still fully dressed, as all the house lights had been out for some time. But what was much more disconcerting was that they were both carrying automatic pistols, and looked as though they knew how to use them. Instinctively, I drew back a little into the leafy cover of the oak. I was used to doing surveillance work as a sniper, when I held all the cards and was armed to the teeth. Like this, I felt as naked and vulnerable as a newborn babe. I thank God I'd made the decision to dig out my old army ghillie, a special hooded camouflage overall draped with naturally coloured Hessian strips. It was designed for snipers, with fitments that allowed them to attach additional natural foliage. Ghillie suits were named after the Scottish estate gamekeepers who first came up with the idea in their fight against poachers at the turn of the 20th century. And to think I had almost considered it would be over the top for a low-priority civvy assignment, And just how wrong had I been? Very it seemed now, as Mullereder also emerged from the French windows, wearing his white tunic and lacy skullcap. So, he hadn't gone to bed either. Seemed like I'd made one dangerous misjudgment after another. "Probably just a cat," I heard one of the students say. The other one nodded. "I think so, Imam. There was nothing on the cameras." But Mullereder didn't look so convinced and scratched at his beard. "Don't be too certain. We cannot afford mistakes tonight," he warned. "And remember, if we are being watched, it will be by professionals." God, that was a joke. Me stuck up a tree with no self-protection, no backup, and my only form of communication was a mobile phone with a battery on the blink. "Then we'd better do a thorough search," the first student decided. "I think that is best," Mullereder agreed. "And let the dogs have a good sniff around." The cleric returned inside the house, while his two henchmen walked off cautiously in opposite directions to circle the house, their automatics at the ready. It was a tense few minutes up in the tree, as I hardly dared breathe, watching and waiting tensely, my leg muscles starting to cramp, and a niggling tickle trying to develop at the back of my throat. The desire to cough just grew and grew, until it almost took on the form of torture. I hardly knew what to do with myself. At last one of the students returned, the dogs now back on the leash. One of the hounds kept looking in my direction, I'm sure, and thank God it didn't bark or growl. Maybe its head was still filled with thoughts of the fox that got away. They took the dogs inside, closed the French windows behind them, and drew the curtains. This time the lights stayed on. I felt my shoulders relax, and my lungs begin to work again. I cleared my throat at last, and considered what to do. I had Lassiter's private mobile number, but didn't think he'd appreciate a call at this time of night. All I had to tell him was confirmation that Mullereder didn't seem as innocent as his reputation suggested, and his two theology students were tooled up and acting as minders. I figured that could wait until the morning. It would probably mean he'd now get authorization to put MI5's own expert watchers on the case, so I was probably just about to put myself out of a job. In fact, knowing that there were actually armed men in the house, I thought it over and decided that probably discretion was the better part of valor. I'd give it another hour, and if everything remained quiet, I'd call it a night and withdraw from my leafy eyrie. Of course, to do that, I'd prefer that the house floodlights be turned off, but irritatingly they remained on. Perhaps the minders were still watching on the camera monitor for signs of an intruder. As I waited, my mind wandered. I was aware of my eyelids becoming heavy with fatigue. Forcing myself to concentrate, I glanced at my watch. I couldn't believe it. Only half an hour had passed. Just then, I noticed the headlights of a car as it turned into the residential avenue below me. It was closely followed by another. The first car slowed as it approached Mullereder's house, before turning into the space in front of the electric gates. The second car stopped behind it. Suddenly, there was movement at the house. The double front doors opened, and the two minders appeared under the ornate portico at the top of a short flight of terracotta steps. Then the electric gates slid back silently to admit the two vehicles, while the two minders advanced to meet the new arrivals. But they were taking no chances, their automatic pistols kept at the ready. I reached for my digital camera with a zoom lens. Both cars were older Mercedes saloon models with darkened windows. All the doors were thrown open at virtually the same time, and the gravel drive was suddenly filled with people. I quickly counted 8. All were male, and most had swarthy